In Puerto Rico, it just keeps happening. More than 500,000 protesters took to the streets yesterday, flooding the narrow roads of Old San Juan, engulfing the island's main highway into the capital. Protesters are demanding that Governor Ricardo Rossello resign after his private chats were made public where he flaunted corruption. He made sexist and homophobic comments, and he even made fun, if you can believe this, I mean, this is really bad. He made fun of dead hurricane victims. Dead hurricane victims. Rossello is not hiding, though. He's out there. He's trying to save his job. Today he said, quote, "The people are speaking and I need to listen." But he didn't do what the people are asking him to do. He didn't step down. So joining us now to help us try to understand this virtual melee that's going on in Puerto Rico is Cesar Ayala, or as we would say in Miami, Cesar Ayala. He is a professor of sociology at the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA. He's also the co-author, by the way, of Puerto Rico in the American Century, a history since 1898. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, give me your take on what's going on there right now with the governor and these protesters that seem to not be willing to relent.
Well, I think the governor is under siege, certainly. Whether he will resign is anybody's guess, but I think he's increasingly under pressure from people from his own party and from Washington to step down because the island, quite frankly, has become ungovernable with this current situation. So there is no sign that the protests will relent or decrease. So we'll know in the next few days.
Well, I'm glad you said Washington, because I think Washington is inextricably tied to what's going on right now in Puerto Rico. Between Vieques, the banks in the United States that seem to have controlled the economy in Puerto Rico for years in a questionable mode, a lot of people would say. Then there was the disastrous economic situation or recession or depression in Puerto Rico, which then sent Americans to have a committee making decisions about how Puerto Rico was going to get out of this mess that doesn't seem to be working. And then the hurricane and all the malfeasance that came with it. So this whole thing, I think, going on in Puerto Rico, if you'll agree with me, Professor, I don't know if you will, has not that much to do with the governor. I think it has to do with a lot of stuff that preceded this situation. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. I think there is a big economic crisis in Puerto Rico that has been going on for about 20 years. It is a crisis, I should say, not only made in the USA, made in Washington. The Congress eliminated fundamental tax incentives that attracted businesses to Puerto Rico, and these were phased out between 1996 and 2006. Now, manufacturing employment in the island collapsed as a result. The island has about half as many manufacturing jobs today as it had in the year 2000. And because Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, and because so many have relatives in the U.S., it is relatively easy to migrate to the U.S. So the island has emptied out. The island has lost about 18% of its population. It had about 3.9 million people in 2000. It has about 3.2 million today. And so this exodus of population creates a downward economic spiral because there's less people to pay taxes, there's less people to shop at the stores, business slows down, and it becomes a kind of vicious circle.
It almost seems, yes, pardon me for interrupting, but it almost seems like they're fighting some style of New Age colonialism. I heard the other day in my research that they were chanting, "Ricky, you must leave and take these friends of yours from Washington with you." What do they mean by that? Do they no longer be associated? Do they no longer want to be a property or a territory of the United States?
Well, I am not sure the protest can be reduced to the status question. That's a complicated answer because, curiously, it seems to be people from all parties, pro-statehood, pro-independence, pro-Commonwealth, that are protesting in the streets. But certainly, so this crisis, this economic crisis, led to the government of Puerto Rico not being able to pay its debt. And so the U.S. Congress then imposed a fiscal review board, which gets to revise everything the government of Puerto Rico does. So in fact, Puerto Rico used to be governed before 1948 by a presidentially appointed U.S. governor, always from the continent. And it is now governed by a committee, but really it's a kind of a sort of collective colonial governor. So whatever measure of autonomy the island had has been lost in this crisis. And I think that's part of what's there in these protests. It's just not only outrage at Mr. Rossello and his administration, but also at the federal authorities that are controlling the island's economy and that hold all the decisions.
Yeah. Professor, we're lucky to have you to be able to take us through this and try and understand what is a very complicated situation, but one that's obviously very heartfelt for the people there protesting. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
So you haven't heard that we're the ones covering the stories that you won't see covered anywhere else? In Venezuela, Kazakhstan, let's go to Hong Kong. And the media reaction to that has been crickets. How about the way we cover those stories? What the hell does that mean? Wale. That's the key word in this case, uprising. Keep? Can you believe that? Watching. This is the right thing for members of the media to do, to actually pick sides. Look, if you like what you see, subscribe.